Have you ever wondered what it would feel like to stand before a flame that has burned for over 1,000 years, tended by warrior women whose very existence challenged the ancient world's understanding of power and femininity? In the ancient world, few places commanded as much reverence and awe as Ephesus, a bustling port city on the western coast of what we now call Turkey. Here, rising majestically above marble streets and golden temples, stood one of humanity's greatest architectural achievements, the Temple of Artemis. But this wasn't just any temple. Within its sacred walls burned a flame that never died, protected by the most feared and respected warriors of the ancient world, the Amazons. To understand the significance of this eternal flame, we must first journey back to the very foundations of Greek civilization. The ancient Greeks believed that fire was a gift from the gods, stolen by Prometheus and given to humanity as both blessing and burden. Fire represented life, knowledge, and divine connection. But some fires were more sacred than others, and none more so than the eternal flame that burned in honor of Artemis, goddess of the hunt, the moon, and protector of women. Artemis wasn't just any goddess. She was fierce, independent, and eternally virgin, demanding absolute devotion from her followers. She commanded respect through strength, not submission. Her temple at Ephesus became the focal point of her worship, attracting pilgrims from across the Mediterranean world. But what made this temple truly extraordinary wasn't just its size or beauty. It was the sacred fire that burned at its heart, and the legendary women who guarded it. The Amazons were unlike any other people in the ancient world. These warrior women lived in a society where feminine strength wasn't just accepted, it was celebrated and feared. According to Greek historians and mythographers, they were daughters of Ares, god of war, and the nymph Harmonia. They lived beyond the edges of the civilized world, in lands where women ruled and men served. But the Amazons weren't just warriors. They were deeply spiritual people, and their greatest devotion was reserved for Artemis. Legend tells us that the Amazon queen Otrera herself established the first temple at Ephesus, bringing with her a sacred flame that would never be allowed to die. This flame, they believed, contained the very essence of Artemis's power, her eternal vigilance, her protective strength, and her connection to the cycles of life and death. The responsibility of maintaining this eternal flame was passed down through generations of Amazon priestesses. These weren't ordinary women. They were chosen from birth, trained in both warfare and sacred rituals, capable of defending the temple with sword and spear while performing the delicate ceremonies that kept the goddess's favor. Every day, these warrior priestesses would tend the flame with rituals passed down through centuries. They would add specially prepared oils, herbs gathered under specific moon phases, and woods from trees sacred to Artemis. The flame required constant attention, not just physical maintenance, but spiritual vigilance. The Amazons believed that if the flame ever died, Artemis would withdraw her protection from all women, leaving them vulnerable to the chaos of a male-dominated world. The temple itself was a wonder to behold. Standing over 350 feet long and 180 feet wide, it was supported by 127 columns, each 60 feet tall. The ancient writer Antipater of Sidon called it the most beautiful structure on earth. But visitors weren't just awed by its architecture. They were struck by the palpable sense of power that emanated from within, the feeling that something divine and eternal resided in its marble halls. At the temple's heart, in the innermost sanctuary called the Adyton, the eternal flame danced on its sacred hearth. The flame wasn't large, perhaps no bigger than a modern campfire, but its significance was immense. Ancient sources describe how the flame seemed to respond to the presence of true believers, burning brighter when the faithful approached, dimming when those with impure intentions drew near. The Amazon guardians lived in chambers surrounding the sacred flame, maintaining a constant vigil. They slept in shifts, ensuring that at least 3 priestesses were always awake, watching over the fire. These women had dedicated their entire lives to this sacred duty, forsaking marriage, children, and personal ambition for the higher calling of serving their goddess. But maintaining the eternal flame wasn't just about keeping it lit. The Amazons believed that the flame was a living connection between the mortal and divine worlds. Through careful observation of the flame's behavior, they could divine the goddess's will, predict the future, and offer guidance to the thousands of pilgrims who visited each year. When storms threatened Ephesus, the flame would flicker in warning. When enemies approached the city, it would burn with unusual intensity. When a woman in childbirth was in danger, the flame would dance in patterns that told the priestesses exactly what rituals to perform to save both mother and child. The eternal flame survived invasions, earthquakes, and the rise and fall of empires. When Alexander the Great conquered the region, he was so impressed by the temple and its guardians that he offered to fund its reconstruction. The Amazon priestesses politely declined, declaring that it wasn't fitting for one god to dedicate offerings to another, for Alexander had begun to consider himself divine. Centuries passed, and the Roman Empire absorbed the Greek world. But the eternal flame continued to burn. Roman emperors, despite their own religious traditions, recognized the power and importance of the Artemis cult. They allowed the Amazon priestesses to continue their ancient duties, understanding that some traditions were too sacred and too deeply rooted to be easily displaced. The flame witnessed the transformation of the ancient world. It burned as Christianity began to spread throughout the Roman Empire, as old gods were gradually abandoned in favor of new beliefs. But even as the world changed around it, the eternal flame remained constant, tended by women whose dedication transcended political and religious upheaval. Historical records suggest that the eternal flame burned continuously for over 800 years. Generation after generation of Amazon priestesses maintained their sacred duty, passing down not just the techniques of firekeeping, but the spiritual understanding that made their guardianship meaningful. What made these women so remarkable wasn't just their warrior skills or their religious devotion, it was their unwavering commitment to something greater than themselves. In a world where women's roles were severely limited, the Amazon priestesses of Artemis represented a different possibility, a vision of feminine power that was both nurturing and fierce, protective and independent. The eternal flame finally died not through neglect or conquest, but through the gradual transformation of the ancient world itself. As Christianity became the dominant religion of the Roman Empire, the old temples were gradually abandoned or converted. The last Amazon priestesses, faced with a world that no longer understood or valued their sacred mission, finally allowed their eternal flame to die rather than see it desecrated. But the legacy of the eternal flame lives on. The story of the Amazon priestesses and their sacred fire has inspired countless works of art, literature, and scholarship. It represents humanity's deep need to connect with the divine, to maintain sacred traditions, and to find meaning through dedication to something greater than individual desires. Today, visitors to modern Ephesus can walk among the ruins of the great temple, now reduced to a single reconstructed column and scattered marble blocks. But the story of the eternal flame reminds us that some things transcend physical destruction. The dedication of the Amazon priestesses, their unwavering commitment to their sacred duty, and their vision of feminine strength continue to inspire people across cultures and centuries. The eternal flame of Artemis teaches us that true power isn't about domination or control. It's about service, dedication, and the courage to maintain what's sacred even when the world around us changes. The Amazon priestesses understood that keeping a flame alive for centuries required not just technical skill, but spiritual strength, community cooperation, and an unshakable belief in the importance of their mission. In our modern world, we might not tend literal eternal flames, but we all have sacred fires in our lives, relationships, values, dreams, and commitments that require constant attention and care to keep alive. The story of the Amazons and their eternal flame reminds us that some things are worth dedicating our lives to, and that the most profound power often comes not from taking but from giving, not from conquering but from protecting.